Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios, and today we're going to be talking about presets. If you've worked with audio for any amount of time, you should be familiar with the concept of presets, but we're just going to go over a quick definition. What are presets? Audio presets are pre-configured settings in music production software designed to help you quickly achieve specific sounds or effects. They solve the problem of spending too much time tweaking settings by providing a starting point or finished sound. And so, yeah, you should be familiar with presets if you've been working with audio software at all over the last 20 years or so. And we're going to go over some of the pros and cons of them, what they can achieve, what they can't achieve, and ways to maybe help you go about thinking about how to use presets or when to use presets. If you're just getting started, for instance, you might have seen an EQ plugin and, something the EQ says, snare EQ or kick EQ or piano EQ or something along those lines. And in my personal experience, I found that presets can be an amazing place to start, as our definition says here. They can solve the problems spending too much time tweaking settings. For instance, let's say that I have myself a wrong thing. Let's say that I have myself a kick drum, which we'll go ahead and bring up here. And we're just going to insert a kick. All right. And then we're just going to give it a 4 to the floor pattern real quickly. And a 4 to the floor just means that the kick is going to be hitting on every quarter beat. And I tend to like putting in either 8th or 16th note increments for aesthetic purposes. There's no real right or wrong when it comes to this kind of thing. You can, like mentioned in previous videos, the length of these for percussive instruments like kicks, snares, and things like that tend to not to matter at all, the length of them. So I do this purely for aesthetic purposes. It just makes it easier for me to kind of recognize the pattern, so to speak, especially when if we're doing more complex rhythms or drum parts or things like that. But anyways, 4 to the floor kick pattern is just going to sound like every quarter note. All right. And, this kick drum may be exactly what you're looking for when it comes to your production, or maybe it's not. And maybe there are things that you can do in order to make this sound a different way or a way that you want it to. And so what a lot of people will do is they will bring up, an EQ of some sort. And let's see if I can find something with some presets here. Okay, so this is a Waves CLA Mix Hub. This is emulating an SSL console, if I'm not mistaken. And if we go up here to our presets, we see tons and tons and tons of presets. All right, these are artists or like engineers, mixing engineers, things like that, producers that have used this plugin to create pre-made settings that will allow this kick drum to sound a certain way. So, for instance, if you are, if you know what you're doing with this, the EQ, compression, the gain, all that kind of stuff, all these various sections, you could probably quickly come up with something that's going to sound exactly the way you want it to. So, like for instance, I might spend some time, if I was if I wanted to get this kick to sound the way I want it to sound, I'd play the kick, And, in a few seconds, I can shape the sound a little bit to get it to sound a little bit more the way I want it to. I might play with some of the EQ, some of the gain staging, the compression settings, the gate. And, try to arrive at a sound, right? Now, this process, if you know what you're doing, can be relatively quick, especially if you know kind of what you want it to sound like. But if you're just getting started, what you might do is start looking and reaching for some of these presets. So we have a preset here that says, kick in. And so if we just click that, well, what it's doing is it's automatically doing a lot of what I just did, and it is picking the ratios, the EQs, the compression settings, like all of this stuff. And it is optimizing it for a kick in mic. And so if we replay this, that's what it's going to sound like. Without it, and with it. Now, maybe this preset makes it sound exactly the way you want it to, but oftentimes it's not, because what these presets are doing is they're taking a very specific engineer style, instrument, whatever the case may be. For instance, this preset might have been designed for a very specific type of style of music. Maybe it was designed for like rock, and you're working on a hip hop track, or maybe like an indie track or something along those lines, or EDM or what have you. And so these settings may not be exactly what you need for your track to work. And so you go and you look for a different preset. Maybe we come over here and we got drums here, and we got a kick, expand or gate or whatever. So we try this kick. And maybe that's perfect for you, or maybe not. And so we go through more presets and we keep looking for, heavy kick cleanup. Now here's without it. And here's with it. And so what you might notice, is that sometimes presets can be hit or miss depending on what you're trying to do. And so what they can do is give you a great place to start. But oftentimes you're going to need to tweak it. And in order to tweak these sounds, you're going to have to understand what each of these tools is doing. For instance, if you've been following the series, we've gone over stuff like EQ, compression, gain staging, and signal flow, and all of these kinds of things. And understanding how each of these components works will allow you to take maybe a preset as a place to start, and then tweak it to fit the needs of your song. Meaning not every single preset, you may not be able to find a preset that is exactly what you are looking for when it comes to your kick drum. And so maybe you're thinking, I really like this preset, but I need a little bit more brightness out of that kick. I really want to kind of hear the detail of it. And so we might reach for our shelving EQ up here. And all of a sudden now it's got a little bit more bite to it, a little bit more. And so understanding how EQ works and how compression works and how these things come together can really help you to take a preset and tweak it to get it to fit where you need. So like a preset might be a great place to start, but oftentimes you'll find that the presets were designed with a very specific intent and purpose in mind. Maybe they were working on a kick that sounds 100% different than what you're working with. And so their kick preset might not be what your kick needs in order to sound the way you want it to sound. And so presets can be very helpful. I use them all the time, but generally speaking, I'm using them as a place to start, not the end all be all, because very rarely do I ever just click a preset and it magically just works. Usually I'm going to have to finagle tweak some settings, shuffle some things around, do various things in order to get it to get to the sound that I'm looking for. And so when it comes to presets, they can be very useful at, getting you started. And so if we were to come to our pros, pro number one might be that, the first one is that they're quick, meaning you don't have to do a whole lot of work. They're just going to be quick and, bam, kick 91, bam, like it's already dialed in. That's all it took. I didn't have to move any of these buttons or any of these knobs, and it's already, where everything's kind of set up roughly for what a kick should be, depending on what kind of kick you're going for. Like this is a very heavily gated kick. And if that's what you're looking for, then that's great. But maybe you've got the gate where you want it now, but you want the character of the kick to change. Right? And so there are things you can look at to tweak that will sort of allow you to tweak what this kick is doing. And so another pro will be that it's, a good, usually it tends to be a good starting point for what you're looking for. And actually, let's do this. Just make it a little easier to look at. So it can be quick. It's often a useful starting point. It can, but the cons are it's usually not precise, or it's rarely ever going to get you exactly what you're looking for. You're probably going to have to tweak it in order to get it to sound the way you want it to sound, or to get it to a point where you want it to sound. And if you're not familiar with some of these tools, maybe it's the only way that you can go about it, which is why I recommend you learn about stuff like EQ, compression, gates, various effects, delays, reverbs. And we'll get more into this kind of stuff because we're actually going to be talking about synthesizers and musical presets as well. But this is just sort of a starting reference here. But when you can start looking at some of these presets and playing with them and see if any of them kind of do what it is that you want them to do, right? So we got, kick sample here. Without and with. And if I were to, EQ this kick, and processing this kick is going to be different depending on the type of music that I'm listening to, or like that I'm working in. Like if it's a rock song, an indie song, a pop song, a hip hop or jazz or whatever, all of these kind of, what other instrumentation is happening. Like a lot of things kind of factor into how I would process this kick at the end of the day. But because I know how to use the tools, I don't necessarily have to reach for a preset right away. I can just kind of start, going in, pushing some buttons here. And getting some results relatively quickly myself. So this is, without it. and then with it. It's making a pretty big difference, right? And, you know, I would probably, even from here, I might have to tweak as I'm going, depending on, like, other instrumentation and things like that. So, like, even for me, this would be just a starting point, so to speak. It's just kind of getting my kick into the ballpark of where I kind of think it should sound based on just this kick in here, like right here. But if I were to, say, pick a different sounding kick, maybe this guy here, well, that's a completely different sounding kick. And all of a sudden, I might have to tweak this again because this is a different kick. It's not, doesn't have the same characteristics as the other kick. I might have to roll off some of this low end here. And, you know, tweak some things to dial this into exactly what I need it to be to fit the kind of the style or the sound that I'm going for. And so presets can be a great place to start, but they typically are not the end all be all. You'll probably need to tweak them. And understanding how EQ and compression and all these other tools that we've gone over, delays, reverbs, etc., are all going to be helpful to know about. Now, let's move away from kicks for now, and let's get into synthesizers, because this kind of has to do with the synthesis process that we've been talking about over the last video or two or whatever it's been. Knowing how synthesizers work and operate can be immensely helpful, because we can go here and we have tons and tons and tons of presets, preset sounds. So, you know, we have this Epiphany. Well, some of these might be a little loud. I apologize. I'm just kind of... And these are all some fun sounds that you can use for different, productions or whatever. And so what you'll find a lot of times is that you'll spend a lot of time going through these presets. And a lot of synthesizers will have them, subgenred out. So like this is all of them. But maybe we're looking for a bass sound or a guitar sound or a key sound or what have you, a pluck sound. And so now this kind of narrows the range of presets a little bit. And these presets oftentimes are, again, a good place to start. But when it comes to a lot of producers out there, I think what they tend to do, especially if you're just getting started, is you're just going to search for a sound that sounds cool. And then you'll just, and then that's it. Knowing the components of the synthesizer, though, might be able to allow you to figure out how you want to tweak these sounds. Because, for instance, oftentimes when I'm going through looking for sounds that I want to incorporate in my productions, I'm going to find something that's very close to what it is I'm looking for. But it's not exactly what I'm looking for. All right, and so one of the reasons I'm going over some of the sound design stuff is because Okay. So I've just kind of arbitrarily picked some random notes to throw in here and see what happens. So maybe this preset is giving me exactly what it is that I want, but oftentimes what I've found at least is that it's close, but not quite exactly what I'm looking for. And so knowing what's going on with the synthesizer and how to operate it can be very helpful. So for instance, we have this sound, and it's a very plucky sound, but maybe it's close to what I want, or it has some characteristics of what I'm looking for, but it's not quite exactly what I want it to be. So maybe instead of a pluck, I'm actually looking for something that has a little bit more of a piano characteristic. And by making a few changes in different spots, or maybe adding in by tweaking some things, by knowing what I'm doing, by understanding what is happening here under the hood, so to speak, I can very quickly make some changes to this that will get me closer to what it is that I'm looking for. And, maybe what I would like to also have happen is having a little bit of control over what I'm doing. And so I can start with a sound that's pretty close to what I'm looking for, but because I understand what the different components of the synthesizer are doing, I can then tweak it in order to get it to exactly what I'm looking for. And so understanding the oscillator section, understanding the filter section, the envelope section, the LFO section, the effects section, all of these things can come together to allow me to tweak the sounds that are coming from these presets and get it to exactly what I want instead of just trying to hope that I, stumble upon something. And so, and again, with the synthesizer, I can just start from scratch, start from the top, and build my own sounds wholesale out of nothing. But oftentimes, like really what I'm doing, like the great thing about modern synthesizers is that there are so many wonderful presets out there that with maybe just a tweak or two, I can really get it to be exactly what I'm looking for whatever song that I'm, currently working on. And I guess let's, maybe go back to our drum example here. And let's go back to our original thing here. And and put back our 4 to the floor. All right. And then we can use our, find a preset for the kick that we think is going to get us close to what we want. All right. And then because I understand what's going on under the hood, I understand what EQ is. I understand what compression is. I understand what these different, tools are. It can help me to shape the sound of my music in order to get what I'm really looking for, instead of hoping that a preset will get me there on its own, or hoping that a preset sound will be exactly the thing I'm looking for. Now, every now and then you will stumble across the perfect sound, and that's great. And you can just go with it. But sometimes oftentimes knowing how these different sections are working on the synthesizer, knowing how these sounds are put together and built, can really allow you a lot of creative freedom to just sort of make a few subtle tweaks. I didn't do a whole lot. I just added an extra oscillator. I put in a little frequency LFO here, for the filter section, and I adjusted our envelope a little bit. I did very little tweaks to this, and it's a completely different sound. So here, let's do this. I'm going to bring up another instance of this software here. And we'll match the volume. And we're going to go to this original preset. What was that? Plucky number 13. Okay. Now, this is what the original sounded like. Why does it not? I don't get it. Oh, because I'm looking at the wrong one. Oops. Okay, so, oops. That would explain some things. I was on the wrong synth. So, okay. So, I don't know. This won't probably be exactly what it was before, but I'm going to do like those same kind of tweaks again real quickly, just to try and get in the ballpark of what I just had. I'm just kind of arbitrarily doing this. I'm not really doing any sort of purposeful thing here. So I think we had this one, and then we turned it on, and we brought the volume down some. And then we Okay. And so this is probably not exactly the way it was before. But this is what it started off as. And because we made a few tweaks to the sound, now we have this. It's very similar, but it's just a little bit different. And then when we combine that in with our, as opposed to this. All right. And so understanding presets or understanding how things work under the hood, understanding your things like your compressions, your EQs, your oscillators, your LFOs, your envelopes, your choruses, your reverbs, your delays, all of these things. These can be extremely helpful to allow you to shape your sound. For instance, let's say I wanted to throw a reverb on this sound, right? And so we come over here to our reverb, and we have presets here. Lots and lots of presets. Right. Let's choose this. So I have no idea what this is going to make it sound like. We're going to turn the wet dry. So there's no reverb happening at all on this sound right now. So I've got the wet dry all the way down to 0. And then we're going to slowly turn this up until we're kind of getting a little bit of the reverb that we want. And that's not quite, maybe I want something that's a little longer, a little more oomphy, because right now it's just kind of a small room sound. And that's not what I'm going for, right? I want something a little bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this time here a little bit so that we got a little bit more of a tail to it. And now we're getting a little bit more into the ballpark of, where like, and again, this is all arbitrary. I'm just kind of playing, like, making some kind of random changes just to give you some examples here. But so like we can tweak our reverbs, we can tweak our delays. We can use these presets to give us a nice little starting point, and then, go from there. To really dial in what it is we're looking for. Now these can also be used for mixing. So like, and this is oftentimes what mixing engineers will do, is that they will, that because they're trying to fit all of these things together in the context of a song, and get them to, have some excitement and some oomph and all that kind of fun jazz, all the things that, you would do to mix when you're mixing a song, kind of getting things balanced and sounding the way you want it to. But in production, these are also tools you can use to get the sounds and the vibes you're looking for kind of off the bat, right? And you can apply some of this stuff as you're going. Whereas, here's where we started with nothing happening. Just kind of the basic presets, if you will, and then when we use our presets and then tweak them, we're getting a whole different vibe. And so presets are awesome. They're a great place to start a lot of times. They're going to give you some insight. And then, honestly, if you look at a lot of the presets, you'll find that a lot of them are kind of doing some similar things. Like, so for instance, if we look at, especially when it comes to EQ and compression and things like that, if you look at this kick in, untouched, you'll find that a lot of them are kind of doing similar things. We're turning up a little bit of the low end here. We are giving a bit of a shelf to our high end. We're turning up a little bit of the mid range, and we're turning down a little bit of the low mids. We're also doing some compression with a slow attack and a fast release. A little bit of a small ratio, and these things. Obviously, the type of kick you have is going to change a lot of what's going on here. But let's look at another kick preset here, if we can find one. Here's another kick preset. And so we are doing a bit of a shelf in the mid-range. We're doing a mid-range shelf here. We're boosting a little bit of the lows, and we are sucking out some of the low mids. We've got a bit more of a ratio going on, but same thing. Slow attack, fast release, gating again, and then in this case we're actually cutting off some of the high end, the very, very high end. This kick 9-1. We're doing a mid-range boost here. We are taking out a considerable amount of the low mids, and we're boosting considerably in the lows. And then we also have a high pass and a low pass happening, cutting off some of the highs and the lows. All right. In this case, we've actually switched around what's happening. So first we're compressing and then we're EQing. We've got a low pass happening here, or high pass rather, sorry. High pass filter going on right here, taking out some of the lows. We're boosting some of the top, the high end here with a bell. We're boosting some mid-range. We're taking out a little bit of the upper, lower mid-range, I guess, around 800 or so. And then we're boosting some of the lows. And then we're compressing. We've got a slow attack, and then a bit of a fast-ish release, but more like a medium fast release and a slow attack. And then a little bit of a higher ratio. So, you might start to, as you go through some of these presets, what you might start to find is a few similarities between things. Like, again, this person decided that they like the compression first and then the EQ, but we're boosting the some of the upper mid-range here, boosting more upper mid-range. We're taking out a little bit of the lower mid-range, and we're boosting the low end a little bit. Fast release, slow attack, like a 2-ish ratio, another high pass filter going on. So like a lot of these things, you might start to look at some of what's going on with these EQs and compression settings, and you'll find that some of them tend to be kind of similar. And so this might give you a gauge. If you go through enough presets, you might start to understand what some commonalities are. Like, although all of these things are a little bit different when it comes to these presets, not everybody's using the exact same numbers or the same, signal flow. Not everybody's using the same, like, EQ first and then compression, or some people are doing compression first and then EQ. They're doing some, but like you might start to find some commonalities. Like a lot of these tend to be sucking out some of the low mid-range and mid-range, low mids, and boosting the highs and the high mids, and then boosting a little bit of the lows. Oftentimes they're doing some high passing, sometimes some low passing. They're almost always doing a fast attack, and then a fast-ish release. So like there's, oftentimes they're employing gates. So you might start to find some similarities between what some of these settings are doing. If you start kind of looking at the different presets and how they're working, you can start to understand how different engineers, or mixing engineers and producers might approach how they go about doing this kind of thing. And so presets, one of the pros actually could be they are good learning tools, right? So they can teach you the thinking of other engineers and producers, and how they approach their thing. But again, one of the big issues is when they came up with these presets, they were working on a very specific kick, a very specific type of kick. And if we go through again here, let's turn off our thing. But if we listen here, a lot of these kicks sound very different from each other. And so if you're not working on a very similar type of kick that this engineer had when they were coming up with these presets, those presets might not work super well for your particular instrument. And so presets are not always going to work. And again, when it comes to things like compression and EQ and things like that, there's sort of a various ways that you can kind of approach how you would go about doing this, depending on the material you're working with. If this preset, let's see, kick mic in with this. So Greg Wells here, when he created this preset, he probably had a kick drum that sounded a certain way, and when he did these moves, when he put these, when he did these EQ moves and set this compressor and set this EQ and did all this, it probably made that very specific kick that he was working on sound absolutely immaculate. But if you try applying this preset to another kick, it might not sound immaculate. It might not sound anywhere near as good as what, it might sound bad for all you know, because it's not the same kick that he was working on. And so that's why I say, presets, one of the cons is that they're not very precise, meaning they are not working on the same material that you are. So you kind of have to understanding the tools, what the EQ is doing, what the compression is doing. And I know I sound like a broken record. I apologize, but I cannot hammer this home enough. It's understanding these tools and how they work that can allow you to shape the sounds to what you want. And when we get into sound design and synthesizers and do some like deeper dives into what we've kind of already been talking about, last week we went over the oscillator section, we went over the filter section, the envelope section, and the LFO section, and very small detail. Like we're going to do some deeper dives into each of these kind of sections and explore not just this synthesizer, but other synthesizers and different types of synthesis. Why this is important is because once you understand these components and how these things work, it will take your ability to create sounds to the next level, because you don't necessarily have to start from scratch. You don't have to you don't necessarily have to build every sound that you use from scratch. You can take presets, which are a wonderful place to start, but maybe they're not going to be exactly what you're looking for. And so this will allow you to tweak things in a way that is going to get you closer to what you want things to be. Same thing if we were to bring up a different type of synthesizer. This is another one we looked at last week, the Zeta. So, again, we have presets that we can use. That will bring up, whatever. So, keyboards. So we have this clicky organ here. And we make it completely different, just by twisting a few knobs, turning a few dials, and understanding kind of what it is that we want the sound to be and sound like. We can really get into some fun things. And then the last thing we can kind of touch on is layering. So, for instance, sometimes not even fully understanding how these presets work, or like the underlying thing. Like, for instance, maybe this is not exactly what I'm looking for. Again, it's super close, and I've made the tweaks, but it's still not quite there. It's just lacking something. Well, maybe we can start layering it with something else. And now that's giving us the vibe we want. Now, again, like, I'm being very arbitrary with this again. Like, I'm not saying that these are I'm just kind of making some random tweaks to things in order to change them in a way that it, makes sense. But depending on what kind of song you're putting together, or the type of genre, or whatever your own musical tastes are telling you, these might work for you, they might not. That's not the important part. The important part is that knowing what the different, how to make the tweaks, understanding the components well enough so that you can be creative with them and dial in exactly what it is you're looking for, can be extremely helpful when you're doing productions. And they'll be able to help you dial in exactly the types of sounds you're looking for. And I know a lot of people will kind of put this, like I said, some of this is crossover to mixing, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, a lot of mixing is just using your own personal tastes to shape the sounds to fit together in a cohesive way that works for, you, the person doing the mixing. When you're doing these productions, you can do a very similar thing. You're trying to fit sounds together in a way that makes sense to you, and shape them to sound the way you want them. And then you can also send them off to a mixing engineer, and that mixing engineer will take those what you've done and take it to a whole other level, or you can do your own mixing. But understanding these tools is going to be an incredibly helpful way to allow you to get the sounds that you want and allow you the creative freedom to really do some fun stuff with these. And so understanding presets, how they work, what they can and cannot do, and understanding, how to make the tweaks to the presets. Because, sometimes a preset will get you 90% of the way there, and you just need an extra, 10% to tweak it just a little bit. You saw what I just did here with this preset. Let's go back to our, this preset here for the kick. So here's where we started. Not bad. So let's turn on our preset here for this kick in. And that's not bad either. But to me, I feel like that's way too gated. I want that tail to come through a little bit more. So I'm going to decrease this gate so that it's not being choked off so much. I'm going to increase the compression a little bit. I like giving just a little extra gain just to get a little bit more oomph going. We're going to add a little bit more bite to it. And then just on this particular plugin, they have two different types of compressors. The blue one tends to have a little bit more of an aggressive sound. And in this case, I kind of like that more aggressive sound for this kick. This is super arbitrary. Just for right now, this is just giving me the vibes that I like better. But in another scenario, I might choose just this regular, the desk EQ instead of this bluey EQ. I just like that it's given just a bit more of an aggressive flavor to it, which I'm liking. And so I've tweaked this EQ based on my knowledge of what, all of these things are doing and based on the source material, right? So like this preset might have been perfect for the exact kick that was, used when they made this preset. But for this kick, I needed to tweak it a little bit. And because I understand the tools, it's making that very quick and very easy. Yeah, here's where we started, with our two presets, or rather like our preset sound and then just our regular kick with nothing on it. And then I changed I made some changes to this sound here, not a lot, just, some subtle things. And now all of a sudden it's got that vibe. And then we, took this kick here and we tweaked the preset a little bit. Right. And again, it's going to depend a lot on the type of instrument you're using, the genre you're working in. If you're doing a pop song, you might use some different sounds, some different instruments, some different EQs, compressions, and all the rest than you would vice versa. And so, kind of understanding what it is that you want the sound to be, and then using the tools to help you get there. And presets can be a great place to start, but they're not often going to be the place that is finished. Now, every now and then you'll run into a preset that is just, it's perfect. It's doing everything you want. You don't need to touch anything. It's great. It's golden. And that's awesome. But a lot of times, most of the time, I would say, you're probably going to run into situations where knowing what is going on under the hood is going to be a huge help. And that can apply to, your EQ, compression, delays, reverbs, choruses, distortions, all that kind of stuff. It's going to apply doubly to your synthesizers. And this is really where I want to we're going to spend the next few weeks really digging into the concept of synthesizers, how they work, how you can use them to shape your own sounds or build your own sounds from scratch, but also how to take presets, sounds that you like already, that are super close to what you want, but they're just, they're missing that one little thing, and understanding, or maybe they have too much. Maybe you want to dial something back. Maybe you found a bass that sounds amazing, but it's doing some weird stuff as you play it that you don't like. And so understanding how the LFO is affecting the sound and how to tweak that LFO to take away some of the movement will give you that perfect bass sound. Or maybe you found a lead sound that you really, really like, but you want to, instead of using it as a lead, you want to use it as a pad. And so you can use the envelope to tweak it and make it more pad sounding. And so this is just tools that we're going to allow you to really shape the sounds in new and creative ways, and take what people have already done and make them perfect for what it is that you are, looking for and what you want to have happen. Like maybe you love that, but you're like, I don't like how there's that little echoey sound, right? And so we're going to take off our ping pong. And then it's better. And you're like, but maybe it's just a little too sharp, so maybe I want to soften it up a little bit. And so these are just different tools that are going to allow you to shape the sounds and really dial in exactly what it is that you want to have happen with the sound. And understanding what's going on and how these different things are reacting and interacting with each other, knowing what the oscillators are doing and how to control them, knowing the envelopes, how they work, and how making different changes to them will affect the sound. Figuring out, filters and LFOs and all this other stuff is really going to help you be able to dial in the perfect sounds. And so you can start with the preset that you want and make any tweaks that you would want to make from there. So anyways, I feel like I've probably hit this home. I know I've sounded like a broken record on this video, but I've done it all to really emphasize the point that while presets can be extremely useful and extremely helpful, for instance, they are great at making things quick. They're useful starting points. And they can be great, learning tools and teach you kind of how how other people are thinking and using the tools in order to get what the sounds that they're getting. But the cons are they're not going to be very precise. They're often not going to work for the exact material you're working with because you're not working with the exact same sounds they were when they came up with the presets. And they're going to need tweaks, which will kind of offset a little bit of this quick thing, because even though a preset is very quick, you might have to tweak it, and tweaking it could take some time. But also, that's tweaking something oftentimes might be quicker than going through 1,000 different sounds. I know I'm being a little facetious here, but oftentimes people are going to go through hundreds. I'm not even. This is not exaggerating. I've gone through productions where I've spent an hour going through presets trying to find the perfect sound for something, when really what would have been quicker would have been to take something that I thought was close to what I wanted but not exactly there, and then tweak that to get it to where I thought it should be. So presets are often going to be useful tools, but just realize that they're not always going to work, and that they're often going to need tweaks because what you're working on is not what they were designed for. You may want to be especially cognizant of that when it comes to things like compression, because oftentimes when the thresholds and things like that are being set up, they're being set up for things that have a certain amount of volume to start with, right? And so you might have to, let's take this off. Let's say that we're working on a kick and we have a, we'll just use a stock compressor here, right? And then this does not have very many presets, I don't think. So we got a kick drum, right? And so a lot of people will say, well, here's my kick drum preset. And it's perfect. It's doing everything I want it to do, except it's not really doing anything. You're only getting, barely any gain reduction here happening. Because the threshold was not set to this. And so at the very least, when it comes to compression, you're going to want to look at what this threshold is doing, because if you're not getting any gain reduction, your compressor is not really working. And so let's tweak this gain reduction. And so we're getting, some actual compression happening. This is a pretty fast attack, too. So if this was me, I would probably have set this much higher. And because we're setting it higher, our attack, we're actually probably going to have to drop our threshold in order to get the same amount of gain reduction. Right. And so anyways, that's just one thing to be, cognizant of or keep in mind is that when it comes to things that are sort of volume dependent, like compression, and things like that nature that are going to react to the incoming signal, you want to make sure that, the signal is reaching a point where, the tool is actually doing something. So anyways, I hope this has all been helpful. I hope you have a better understanding of presets, what they are good at, what they're not good at, or what they're, what they can do, what they cannot do, and how you can take the presets and, hone them in a way that is going to be, that's going to get you to the sound that you're looking to get. Next week, I think we're going to be, my goal next week is to dive deeper into synthesizers and the different types of synthesis and explore more of that. But I thought that this would be a good place to put this video, because we're going to get into a place where, so I think sometimes people don't understand why it's important to know how a synthesizer works, because they're just going through all the different presets, all these different sounds until they find the one that they, that they like, and then that's it. And they don't touch anything, they don't tweak anything, and then later on they're wondering why it's not sounding exactly the way they want it to sound, or the vibe's not quite right, or whatever, when they could just make a small tweak to this knob or that knob or what have you, and all of a sudden it's way better. It's working way better for the type of music you're doing. So anyways, with that in mind, next week we're going to get more into that kind of process. But I hope that this video has been helpful and that you kind of understand the presets again. I guess one last thing to mention before we get out of here. A lot of people might look, I know that there's some people out there that say if you're using presets, you're not a real engineer, or you're not a real producer, or you're not a real whatever, like you're cheating. That's not true. What makes you a real engineer, a real producer, a real, music person is your ability to be creative and use the tools that you have at your hand. And if a preset can help you, get to a great starting point, or get you a good sound, then that's awesome. Like that, do that. There's nothing wrong with using presets. Then don't let anyone out there tell you that presets are bad or that they are wrong or that you shouldn't use them. They exist for a reason. They're popular for a reason. My goal here is just to show you that sometimes they are not going to get you exactly what you're looking for. And so understanding the underlying sort of thinking or the underlying, techniques or like how things work, things like compression, things like EQ, things like, your LFOs, oscillators, filters, envelopes, what have you, knowing how all of that kind of stuff works is going to allow you to take these presets to a whole other level and make them work for you in a way that they maybe previously hadn't. And so anyways, with that, I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful week, a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.